Arizona Sunshine. Let's talk about it. So, Arizona Sunshine, specifically the Oculus Quest 2 version, is a VR zombie game, really. That's about all that you can really say about the game type. It really is only just VR zombies. But it's got a really nice campaign. If you're going fast, you know what you're doing, you can really complete the campaign in about 2.5 hours or so. So that's kind of short. But if you're brand new to it, it could take you between 4 to 6 hours, depending on how you play, how many times you die and have to restart, all those kind of things. If you're going for completionist, it takes about 8 hours. Plus, there is 2 DLCs for it, which aren't that expensive. Plus, there is a version that you can buy on Oculus Quest and Steam stores, where it does come with the DLCs included. There's also multiplayer modes, and there's also single player modes and survival modes. So the campaign, let's talk about that specifically. So the campaign just has you as the character just wandering around trying to figure out where you're or what's going on, if anyone else is alive. Mostly just following this radio signal down, trying to figure out if you can reach this colony. The DLCs have you playing as military man. Well, it's not actually his name, but I don't want to spoil too much of it. You play as military man, and you're trying to follow your commander's, orders and complete some objectives for that. I don't want to spoil those DLCs too much because I know quite a few people who haven't played them. But the DLCs are just as good as the main campaign. Specifically, though, you should look into them if you're going to get them, because technically, I think they both come before the actual main campaign, but I'm not quite sure. I know at least one of them does. So I would look into that before you play the game itself. But the campaign, you go through all these different levels, all the different maps. Sometimes you're down in the dark in a mine shaft, just walking around and exploring. One time you're in a military base, operating a minigun. There's a whole bunch of different stuff that's going on. Now, originally when I got this, I got it after the October 2019 release of the Oculus Quest. And I got it as like one of my first VR games. And when it initially came out on Oculus Quest 2, there wasn't very many options for it. Like guns and stuff. There was a handful of them. There was like a revolver, a singular pistol, I think. There might have been a second pistol. There was a M1 carbine, just like a World War II M1 carbine, and like a couple of other guns. There really wasn't much. But in the years that have followed, the last 4 years, they've consistently updated the campaign and added more guns into it, as well as into the other modes, but I'll talk about those in a minute. And so it's really worth going back and playing again and again, because just getting to play through with all the different weapons is a lot of fun. So I do recommend continually playing it when you hear about a new update, when guns are added, because it is worth it to go back through and play again, even just to play with the different weapons. I enjoy going through and doing that. There's also different difficulty settings that you can run through. So there's a whole bunch of different things that you can do to change up the story just slightly to make it more interesting. But I definitely think it's interesting enough that it is worth continually replaying, which in my opinion makes this game even better, because not a lot of games are worth going back through and replaying. Now, as far as the multiplayer goes, there is multiplayer campaign and multiplayer survival. There is not multiplayer like player versus player much. Multiplayer campaign works really well. I've done that with a couple of my friends. It works. It's pretty smooth. Never really run into any bugs there. The only thing that I've run into is kind of sometimes there's like a lack of ammunition on the higher difficulty settings. It doesn't really feel like it's set up for 2 players as compared to just playing single player for those higher difficulties. But again, it's not that big of an issue. If you know what you're doing, you'll know how to ration out your ammo anyways. You'll be super careful about it, and you should be okay. As far as the survival maps go, one of them kind of sucks, and you're just like standing in like a little square, and you can only run around inside that square, and the zombies come running at you. There's some other ones where you're in like a building, and you've got multiple floors to ascend, and it's like Call of Duty, where you've got to find different keys and solve different puzzles almost to do that. One of them is just the trailer park, and you just like run around in the trailer park and you just wait for different rounds for different guns to drop in, and you just kill the zombies in that zone. I personally enjoy them. I know there's a couple of other maps that I haven't played much, I think. Um, but the multiplayer or the survival maps are a lot of fun as well. Again, with multiplayer, the higher the difficulty you play it on, the more rare ammo feels to be. But again, if you're smart and you know what you're doing, it's not too hard to ration out the ammo, but it does become a bit of a challenge in the higher waves just because, having to ration out ammo, you can't just like run around yourself and collect all the ammo. You have to check in with your teammate and make sure that they can, get the ammo they need as well. So some of that's a kind of an issue, but not really. But yeah, overall, it's a lot of fun to play the campaign on this game multiple times. The DLCs were really good DLCs. I think they were about 45 minutes to an hour and a half a piece. So they do add a good bit more content to the game. The maps, the survival maps, they also are a lot of fun to keep coming back and playing. So there is a lot of incentive to get this game just for replayability. So in that sense, I think this ranks as one of the better VR games that I've played. But overall, the graphics on it are not, they're not stellar, but they're not bad. The guns are pretty cool. They're not like super accurate on like sound effects and stuff, but I'm not too worried about that because of what this game is. But overall, I do think it's a lot of fun. Um, there's a couple things that I think could use fixing, but nothing like super bad. How do I say this? When you're playing multiplayer and you're like watching your teammate move around, their movements are kind of like weird and jerky and not really fluid, which isn't like a problem with the game play, but it is a problem as far as like it's just kind of derpy and funny looking. So it's not like a downside to the game, it's just funny looking. It could use with a fix, but it's not super important. Beyond that, I would definitely play the game again and again and again. So I would definitely recommend it to anyone playing on an Oculus Quest 2 or on any other VR set that this is on, because it's worth getting. I think it was like $30 for the game. Not too bad of a price really for the game since it is replayable. If it wasn't replayable, $30 does seem like a bit much for only like 4 hours of gameplay. But when you include the DLCs, the multiplayer, the survival, co-op campaign, all that kind of stuff, it does, feel like $30 is okay. So yeah, I would give Arizona Sunshine a check.